And welcome to Local Edition on Time Warner Cable. This is the Sacramento Report. I'm Steve Swat. My guest this segment is Jerome Horton, who is the chair of the California Board of Equalization. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
And the board, for our viewers who may not be familiar with the board, I mean, you administer the sales and use tax in California, right?
As well as we're the adjudicated body over the franchise tax, income tax, property tax, just about every tax out there we sort of administrate or adjudicate.
Right. Let's talk about taxes and I guess the underground economy when it deals with marijuana, because in California, of course, marijuana is medical marijuana certainly, is legal. Marijuana, either legal or illegal, is taxable.
It is.
But you're not getting any. You're getting very little.
We're getting very little. It's just a drop in the bucket, Steve. We get about a little over $100 million. I think there's somewhere about $2 billion in the medical marijuana. In addition, of course, criminals who are selling illegal marijuana, well, it's taxable. And much like in the days of Al Capone, you owe the tax.
But they're not paying it.
They're not paying
obviously.
it. Well, they're not paying it because they don't want to self-incriminate themselves.
Sure.
That's not to say if we had the proper structure in place in the regulatory process and the enforcement arm, we could not only enforce the collection of the taxes, but we can also begin to prosecute individuals who are illegally selling marijuana on our streets to our children and creating all this addictive activity.
And you can bring in the tax revenue on the medical marijuana.
On the medical marijuana at the same time.
In California. So, so you're going to move in the next legislative session to try to establish this regulatory framework?
Exactly. I think many of the pieces of legislation that have been presented thus far attempted to sort of raise taxes on marijuana when the law, the federal and state laws, currently says that the sale of marijuana, whether medical marijuana or illegal marijuana, is taxable. It's subject to income tax, it's subject to sales tax, and all the other appropriate taxes that any other business in California would be subject to. So our objective is to make sure criminals are paying their fair share as well. So we're looking to introduce legislation that creates a regulatory scheme that allows the identification and distinction between medical marijuana and illegal marijuana, and at the same time create a licensing process. It's been tried before, but I think the challenge is that it's not a regulatory scheme that actually controls it, and there's always that tax element in it when it's currently taxable. And so we believe that all you really need to do is shift the responsibility of paying the tax from the street gang member or the dispensary or whichever they happen to be to the wholesaler, because there are fewer wholesalers in the state of California than there are retailers.
It's one thing, I think, to identify the wholesalers in terms of medical marijuana, but it's quite another to come up and find these wholesalers in the illegal marijuana.
Well, we know who they are too, Steve. I mean, we're constantly shutting them down. If you just fly over California, you can see them growing and so forth. And as the product comes in, either through the ships or through the ports and so forth, is easily identifiable. The challenge is that we don't have the enforcement arm to actually enforce it. It's not something that the average police officer is engaged in. This is really an area where the taxing agencies have the authority. Given the proper resources, we can bring this under control.
And we're looking at a couple $1 billion.
Couple $1 billion,
right.
Couple $1 billion. And I'll tell you, the way I got interested in this is that a friend of mine's daughter was beat up by gang members. And I figured as the tax guy, there was very little I can do. And I said, the minimum I can do is make sure that they are prosecuted and that they collect and pay their taxes.
Okay. Well, we went after Al Capone on taxes.
Yes.
Right? So, Jerome Horton, thanks for coming by and talking about this
Steve.
fascinating issue, and best of luck with this legislation moving forward.
Thank you, Steve.
And thanks to our viewers also for watching Local Edition on Time Warner Cable. A reminder, you can see this and other interviews on My Government on Demand, also on YouTube. I'm Steve Swat. We'll see you next time.